The tracks ran silent under a pale evening sky. No sound of wheels, no whistle. No movement, just the long stretch of iron glinting faintly in the light that comes before dark. He stood near the signpost, suitcase at his feet, breath clouding faintly in the cool air. The station was almost forgotten, no small, wooden, tucked between hills that rolled endlessly into gray distance. One flickering lamp hung above the bench, swaying a little in the wind. He checked his watch. The hands hadn't moved since morning. Still, he waited. There was something about this place that felt outside of time. The stillness had weight, the kind that presses on your chest but doesn't hurt, just reminds you you're here, somewhere far off. He thought he heard the faint hum of a train. He looked down the tracks, squinting through the fading light. But there was nothing, just fog gathering low across the rails. He sat on the bench. The wood was cold and damp. His suitcase leaned beside him. Old leather, cracked and scuffed from years of travel. Inside it were things that didn't matter much anymore. A few photographs, a letter he'd never sent, and a small, folded map of places he once thought he'd go. The air smelled of iron and rain. A soft chill moved through the station, rustling the few remaining leaves that clung to the nearby trees. He tilted his head back, staring at the dim light above. "Am I too early?" he murmured, "or too late?" No one answered. Just the faint echo of wind moving through empty distance. Then, from far away, so faint he almost doubted it, came the low, drawn-out sound of a whistle, long, slow, the kind that reaches not just your ears, but somewhere deeper. He stood, heart steady but alive, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the curve of the tracks. Something was coming. Asterisk, the sound grew slowly, deep and distant at first, then steady, a low hum threading through the quiet. He stepped closer to the edge of the platform, the wind carrying the faint metallic rhythm of wheels turning over unseen tracks. The fog thickened, curling low around his shoes. He could barely see past a few meters now. Only the faint shimmer of the lamp above and the soft glow of the horizon remained. Then a light, small at first, then brighter. A single headlamp cut through the mist, moving toward him in slow, steady motion. He felt the air change, a shift, a pressure like the space between seconds had stretched open. And then the train emerged. It was old, but not ruined. The metal shone faintly, its surface brushed with rain and time. The windows glowed dim gold from within, like candlelight behind thin curtains. As it slowed to a stop, steam drifted from beneath the wheels, wrapping the whole platform in a warm, ghostly breath. The doors opened with a soft click. He waited, watching. No one stepped out. No conductor, no passengers, no sound of movement from inside. Just the hum of the engine and the faint hiss of steam escaping into night. He hesitated, then took one step forward. The wooden boards creaked under his weight. "Anyone there?" He called softly. Only the wind answered, quiet, thin, fading into the fog. He looked back once at the empty hills, at the single lamp swaying above the bench. Then he picked up his suitcase and stepped aboard. The air inside was warmer than he expected. Soft light lined the ceiling, golden and still. Seats ran in neat rows, each one empty but perfectly kept. He moved down the narrow aisle, his footsteps muffled by the carpet that looked freshly cleaned. The smell of rain lingered faintly in the air, mixed with something sweet tea, maybe, or the memory of it. He stopped by a window. Outside, the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing, shifting with slow breaths. Then, without sound or motion, the doors slid closed behind him. A soft jolt passed through the floor, and the train began to move. Asterisk, the train moved without noise, smooth and steady, almost gliding. He sat near the window, his suitcase on his lap, listening to the soft hum beneath the floor. Outside, the fog rolled like a living tide, pale and endless. No stations, no lights, just the same soft white drift stretching in every direction. After a while, he noticed something strange. The reflection in the window wasn't quite matching his movement. When he turned his head, the reflection turned slower, like it was thinking before it followed. He blinked, rubbed the glass, but the fog outside swallowed everything again. Then, a whisper of sound, faint like the rustle of paper. He turned. A few rows down, a seat that had been empty now had a shape sitting in it. A man, or maybe an outline of one. His features were hard to read in the dim light. The figure sat still, hands folded, head tilted slightly toward the window. The traveler hesitated, but the air didn't feel threatening. It felt old, familiar, even. He cleared his throat quietly. "Do you know where this train goes?" The figure didn't move. Then, a slow breath, almost like a sigh. "To where you left," came the answer, soft as the fog itself. The traveler frowned. "Where I left." But before he could ask more, the figure faded. Not vanished, just less visible, like fog losing shape. He looked around. The other seats were still empty. Only the faint shimmer of light trembled across the carriage walls. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. The rhythm of the train felt slower now, like each turn of the wheels was counting something down. And outside, through the shifting fog, faint outlines began to appear. A fence, a gate, a field with a tree in the middle. He knew that tree. He sat forward, hand against the window. That field, he hadn't seen it since he was a boy. Then the sound of soft footsteps came from the far end of the carriage. Someone walking closer. Asterisk. The footsteps came slow, steady, measured, against the hum of the moving train. He turned, trying to see through the pale light between the seats. From the far end of the carriage. Tall, quiet, his face mostly shadowed beneath a low-brimmed hat. He moved like someone used to silence, each step landing without sound. When he reached the traveler's row, he paused. The man's voice was low, careful. "You're early." The traveler blinked. Early for what? The man tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something in the distance. Then he smiled, faint and tired. For remembering, he gestured to the window. The fog had thinned just enough now that the world beyond the glass began to take shape. The field from his childhood was clear, the crooked fence, the narrow dirt path winding toward a small wooden house. The traveler felt his chest tighten. "That's my..." "Yes," said the man in the gray coat. "Where it began." He took a seat across the aisle, resting his hands on his knees. The train's motion softened, the lights dimmed slightly. The traveler looked around. "What is this place?" "A dream." The man's eyes lifted. They were calm, steady, almost kind. Not quite. Just what the mind builds when it slows down enough to listen. Outside, a bird crossed the fog, wings stretched, slow in motion. As if gliding through honey dot, the traveler watched it pass, his thoughts quiet. After a while, he spoke again. "Are there others on this train?" "There are always others," said the man, "but they only appear when you're ready to see them." The traveler leaned back, his pulse slowing. Something about that sentence made sense, even if he didn't understand why. For a long while, neither spoke. The train kept moving, smooth as breath. Then the man stood up. At the next stop, he said softly, "You'll step outside, but don't walk too fast. The place remembers you differently than you remember it." And just like that, he began walking toward the next carriage. His coat brushed the edge of the seat, a whisper of fabric and fog, and he disappeared through the door. The traveler sat still, hands resting on his suitcase. Outside, the house was clearer now. Yellow light in the window, smoke rising faintly from the chimney, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, soft and far away. The train began to slow. Asterisk, low. Asterisk. The train eased to a stop with a quiet sigh. The sound of the brakes was soft, more like exhaled air than metal on metal. When the doors opened, a faint breeze rolled in, carrying the scent of grass, damp earth, and something warm like old wood. He stood, gripping the handle of his suitcase, and stepped out. The fog thinned just enough for him to see the outline of the field he knew so well. The same crooked fence, the same leaning tree at the edge, even the same half-broken post by the gate. He stood for a moment, not moving, just breathing it in. Everything looked almost right, but not quite. The air felt thicker, slower, as if time was walking beside him. He made his way along the narrow dirt path, his shoes pressing softly into the damp ground. Every few steps, he glanced back, but the train was already fading, swallowed by fog. Only the faint sound of wheels turning lingered. Like a heartbeat in another room, the house stood small and quiet at the center of the field. The same chipped paint, the same window above the porch where the curtain always moved a little in the wind. He walked closer. The door was half open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and rain-soaked wood. The old clock still hung by the doorway, though its hands didn't move. The table was set, 2 cups, both empty. He placed his suitcase down by the wall and walked through each room slowly, touching the edges of furniture, letting the weight of old memories fall into his hands. The walls seemed to breathe around him. In the corner of the living room, an armchair sat facing the window, the same one his father used to sit in when the evenings got long. He stepped closer. The fabric was worn thin, but the shape of it held a quiet warmth. And then, from somewhere deeper in the house, came the faint sound of humming, a low, familiar tune, slow, gentle, the kind that used to play when storms passed. He turned his head toward the sound. The hallway stretched out before him, darker near the end. The hum continued, steady, pulling him forward. He took a slow breath, then began to walk. The hallway felt longer than he remembered. The light from the front room barely reached this far, fading against walls that held a soft, gray stillness. He walked carefully, his hand brushing along the wallpaper. The faint texture of its old pattern still there beneath his fingertips. The humming continued, low, calm. It came from the room at the very end, the one that used to stay locked. He stopped just outside the door. It was half open, a sliver of golden light spilling through the gap. He listened. The tune was clearer now, a simple melody, slow, rising and falling with the rhythm of breath. He hadn't heard it in years, but something deep in him knew every note. He pushed the door gently. The hinges didn't creak. Inside, the room was small and warm, the air thick with the smell of rain and candle wax. A single lamp burned on the table, its light trembling softly. And sitting by the window was a woman, her back turned to him, her hair gray now, but the shape of her shoulders, the tilt of her head, they were all the same. He stood there, frozen. His voice came out rough, quieter than he meant. "Mom." The humming stopped. She didn't turn right away. When she did, her face was calm, not surprised, not frightened, just quietly aware, like she'd been expecting him. "You took your time," she said softly. Smiling, he stepped closer, his throat tightening. "I didn't know I could still find this place." Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the fog pressed faintly against the glass. "You never lost it. You just stopped walking far enough." He didn't answer. He just looked at her, at the lines of her face, the way her hands rested in her lap, the way her voice seemed to fill the air with something alive. After a while, she said, "You're still carrying it, aren't you? That weight." He nodded once. She reached out her hand. "Then leave it here. That's what this place is for." He stepped forward slowly, her fingers warm against his. As she took his hand, the silence between them grew soft, not empty, but full of everything they didn't say. Outside, the fog began to thin, revealing faint shapes of trees. The fence, the hill beyond the field. It all felt lighter now, almost as if the world itself was exhaling. The clock in the other room ticked once, the first sound it had made in years. Asterisk, he sat by her side. The soft hum of the lamp flickering in the quiet. The room felt both smaller and endless, the kind of stillness that stretches beyond time. For a while, neither spoke. His hand rested in hers, his other still clutching the handle of his suitcase. "You brought that again," she said gently. "You never travel without it." He looked down. The suitcase seemed heavier now, though he hadn't added a thing to it. "I thought I needed what's inside," he said. "I thought it was all I had left." "Show me," she said. He hesitated, then set it on the floor and unlatched the clasps. The hinges groaned softly. Inside, there wasn't much, just folded papers, old photographs, a worn-out scarf, a letter he never sent. Things that used to matter. Things that once held his life together. She looked at them with a kind of quiet kindness, not pity, not sadness, just understanding. "You carried memories like stones," she said. "But stones only weigh you down when you forget to build something with them." He swallowed. His throat ached. "They were all I could hold on to." She reached into the suitcase, picked up one of the photographs, a picture of him as a boy standing in front of the same house, his father beside him, both squinting at the sun. The edges were bent, the colors faded. "You held onto love," she said softly, "and grief came with it. That's all right, but you don't have to take it any further." She placed the photograph back inside and closed the lid with both hands. Her touch lingered there for a moment. Then she looked at him again. "When you wake," she said, you'll remember the light, not the weight." The words hung in the air, sinking deep into him. Something in his chest eased, a slow, unfamiliar calm spreading outward. He nodded, barely managing to speak. "I think. I understand." Her smile was faint, almost invisible. "You always did. You just forgot." Outside, the fog had cleared enough that he could see the sky. A faint gray turning to blue, the first trace of morning. The air carried a hint of warmth, and the walls of the old house seemed to breathe with it. He stood, the suitcase still by his feet, for the first time. He didn't pick it up. Asterisk, he lingered a moment longer in that quiet room. The soft light brushed against the wooden walls, touching the corners like it was waking them too. His mother sat still, her eyes half on the window, half on him, that same calm look she always had when she knew something he didn't yet understand. He turned once more toward the open doorway, where the smell of rain and soil drifted through the hall. "Will I see you again?" he asked. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never really ends. "Every time you remember to look, I'll already be there." The lamp flickered once, its light dimming, as though the room itself was gently falling back to rest. He took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. The humming had stopped, but the air still carried its echo. Each step felt lighter than the last dot by the time he reached the front door. The fog outside had thinned into a pale morning mist. The field glistened with dew, the grass bending under soft light. Birds moved through the still air, their wings slow and quiet. He stepped onto the porch, the wood cool beneath his feet. The world looked both real and far away, as if it were remembering itself at the same time he was. The house behind him seemed smaller now, almost transparent at the edges. He turned back once, wanting to hold the sight a little longer. The window glowed faintly, not from any lamp, but from something warm inside it. A shape sat by the window, still, peaceful. Then the light faded with the fog. He walked through the field, the grass brushing against his legs. Every breath filled him with that quiet, heavy sweetness that only morning carries. At the far edge, the old tracks ran straight through the open plain. The train waited there again, its door open, steam curling gently from beneath. This time, it didn't feel strange. It felt like a return. He climbed aboard and sat by the window. The seat was warm, the rhythm of the engine soft and steady. As the train began to move, he looked out one last time, the field, the fence, the house in the distance slowly fading into mist. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt light. He felt light. The train moved slow at first, then steadier, the sound of its wheels blending with his breathing. Outside, the fog gave way to thin streaks of gold that spread quietly through the sky. The world beyond the window was no longer empty. There were fields again, faint outlines of trees, rivers that shimmered like glass. He sat still, hands resting on his knees. The suitcase was gone. Only a faint imprint on the floor showed where it once had been. He didn't feel the loss, just a strange, full quiet, a peace that reached into every part of him. The train passed through places he almost remembered. A narrow bridge, a field of tall grass that bent in the wind, a row of lights that shimmered faintly like stars at ground level, and in the seats around him, faint outlines began to take form. Passengers, some reading, some resting with eyes closed, others simply watching the view. Their faces were soft, peaceful, touched by the same quiet he felt. They weren't ghosts. They were travelers, just like him. He turned toward the window again. The fog was almost gone now, replaced by a low morning haze that glowed from within. The sun wasn't visible yet, but its warmth reached through the glass, brushing his skin like a memory that had finally returned. He let his head rest against the seat. The hum of the train blended with the rhythm of his pulse. It all felt like one long exhale. The man in the gray coat appeared again, this time seated across from him. His hat was resting on his knee, his expression softer than before. "You found what you came for," he said. The traveler nodded slowly. "I didn't know I was looking for it." "That's how most find their way here," the man said. "Not by searching, just by being quiet enough to arrive." He looked out the window again. The landscape shimmered now, as if the whole world was caught between waking and dreaming. "When you wake," the man added, "remember how the silence sounded. It will help you find your way again." The traveler closed his eyes. The train's rhythm softened to almost nothing. A long breath fading into the distance. Light filled the carriage, pale, gentle, endless. Asterisk, the light came slow. Not in a burst, but like dawn testing the edges of the world. Gentle, patient, warm. He opened his eyes to it, unsure if he was still on the train. The sound was gone now. No wheels, no hum, no fog pressing against the glass. Only stillness. He stood. The aisle stretched ahead of him, glowing faintly, the seats empty again. But the light moved, soft currents of gold and pale white, shifting like wind through leaves. When he stepped forward, the floor felt less like wood and more like water holding its shape. It didn't frighten him. It felt familiar, the kind of quiet he used to chase his whole life without knowing where to look. The voice came not from outside, but from within the light itself. not a sound. Really, more like a feeling that carried words. You have reached where memory ends. He closed his eyes, listening. And where peace begins. The warmth touched his chest, his shoulders, his face. It wasn't blinding. It was the kind of light that forgives. Every breath he took seemed to loosen something, one layer after another, until only calm remained. He thought of the house, the fence, the field, the woman by the window. He didn't need to see them again. They were already part of him now, steady as heartbeat. Then, faintly, he heard a sound, soft, rhythmic, far away. Waves, maybe, or wind through open grass. And with it came a pull, not backward, not forward, just a quiet urging to rest. He whispered, barely moving his lips, "Is this the end?" And the voice, gentle and low, replied, "No, just a place to set things down before you wake." He smiled without realizing. The light grew warmer, softer. It filled him slowly, completely, until he wasn't sure where he ended and it began. Outside, or maybe within. The world breathed once more. Then a deep, calm quiet, and in that stillness, somewhere far away, a morning breeze moved through an open window, carrying the scent of rain and wood and home and home.